On Living Proof today, our guest has an incredible story of journeying through the Amazon jungle with 4 young children, bringing healthcare and education to remote communities. Josephine, I am so excited to hear this story. I can't wait to get in and hear all about your journey through the Amazon jungle. But before we get into that, let's talk about why you decided to do that. What happened for you to decide to do this with 4 young children?
I guess I was about 10 years old, and my parents had this blind man who I consider the closest man to Jesus.
Yeah.
And I remember being homesick one day from school, and you could go into the den when you were sick and you could put yourselves in the soft chair. And my parents had a little hospitality room above the den where you could go. And he came down, and for sure he would have impacted me by just the way he spoke to me.
Yeah.
And around that same time, it was a time when there was a lot of enemy activity, battle coming against me in my life.
Resistance.
Yeah, resistance. And I also had, I guess, a vision, and this man obviously had something to do with it. He must have spoken to me or prayed for me or something like that. And I got up the next thing I remember is our 3rd grade teacher. I was about 10. She said to us, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And everyone was saying, "I want to be a nurse or a doctor, or a teacher." That's about all you could be in my day. And I just stood up, and as clear as day, I said, "I want to be a missionary in the Amazon jungle." And so I knew, and then ever since that time I had this passion, but I realize now that was a calling way back then. So never underestimate the impact that you can have on a child's life.
Amazing. So right back then you wanted to be a missionary. I just think that's absolutely incredible. So tell us the journey about preparing. Like, what do you do to prepare to go on the Amazon?
Well, then I was 20 years old, and I was at art school, because during those years from about 10 to 17, I was really lost. I had no purpose in life. I didn't know what to do. My mum was an artist, so I just went to art school.
Yeah.
And then in my 3rd year, I really came to know Jesus. It was a very remarkable experience, because I was really rejecting the very legalistic church that I had come from or been grown up in. And this was totally different. And so I actually I was starting to read a Bible because a friend of my brother-in-law said, the answers are in the Bible. And so I started to read it, and it didn't make sense at first. I didn't understand a word. And then I was kind of talking to God, but I said, well, okay, if you're there and you're real, I want to know you. And if you really love me and have a plan for my life, I want to know that too.
Yeah.
So I started reading it, and it didn't make sense at first, but the more I read and the more I was genuine, the more I really wanted to know, not just know so that I could then go ahead and reject it.
Yeah.
If I wanted to, then, it was like God would show up.
Yeah.
And then one day, after about 8 months, I just found myself on my floor giving my heart to God and saying, okay, God, take over, do what you like, here's my life. And that's when I got this calling. And so, because my next question was, what do you want me to do? And so then he said, leave art school, go nursing, go and do midwifery, in which I thought would be in England, which it was. And then go and get some, you'll work for a bit, and then you'll get some missions training, and then you'll go down to a tropical jungle with your husband, and you'll plant churches using healthcare and have your 4 children. That's exactly what happened. Yeah, so whenever we tell that story to students, because we have this great privilege of being able to mentor young people now, and whenever we tell that story, my husband straight away gets up and says, don't worry, I have never met anyone with a calling like hers. Yeah.
So you went and studied nursing and then midwifery?
Yeah, I studied nursing here at the Royal Adelaide 4 years, and then I did midwifery in England over a year, and then the English midwife came over from Canada, recruited us. I took another girl from Wales in England. She's still there today she's married with 3 children, grown children as well. And then from there, I already told them at the interview, look, I can only be there for 6 months. I know that I'm moving on after that. I knew, but I'm bringing someone, I said. You gotta accept me. And then I joined Youth with a Mission in California.
Wow.
Met my husband and came back to Australia. Didn't all happen at that time. Came back to Australia, went to Hong Kong, went over to Los Angeles again with a team for the 1984 Olympics.
Wow.
And then met up with Kent again, fell in love, and then we talked about going down to Brazil and bringing up our children in another culture and speaking another language.
Wow. So it was a bit of a natural occurrence from, you know, your 10-year-old desire of wanting to be a missionary to then leaving art school, becoming a nurse, and then it was just the next natural step was, well, let's just jump into it.
Yeah,
wow.
But someone's in control. I mean, I couldn't have kind of worked out all those sequences like they worked out. Do you know what I mean? You know, so obviously God does have a plan for us because he loves us so much.
Yeah. So let's get into this epic story about the journey on the Amazon. Oh my goodness, I don't even know where to start. This is so cool. So tell us about your experience.
Well, I guess to back up a bit, my husband, how we ever got called there, we did a school called the School of Applied Cross-Cultural Training.
Okay.
And we did that with Youth with a Mission in California, and we had mission greats as our teachers. We had, you know, people, Don Richardson that had written Peace Child. We had there were so many missionaries at the U.S. Center for World Mission in California, where our school was and held. And I just thought, well, hey, wait a minute, we're serving the same God. There's no reason why we can't go and do epic stuff as well. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the same God. There's nothing great about us, but there's everything great about him, right?
Yeah.
And so we, my husband had this, had this thing about the Amazon, Brazil, because he had arranged for an exchange student to go there before. And I had already had that Amazon tucked in my heart as well as a young kid, right? And so and then the school wanted a couple to be on the ground so that we could receive the other students. So it all kind of came together like that. Yeah. And but he went down on a spy out the land trip with some other guys, and they went into a primitive tribe, the Zuru-Aha tribe. They went into that first, and we were just married, and I stayed home, and he went down there, and it was a pretty amazing trip. In fact, it's written in the first chapter of the book, or the second chapter of the book. And so, you can read about it if you want. But so we had this thing about Brazil, so we started to prepare to go. And that's when we had a real certainty in our hearts that, we were going to go down there, we were going to bring up our family, we had a notion in our hearts that we were going to church plant amongst unreached people groups. But we sensed that it wasn't in the tribes. There's plenty of tribes that you can still reach in the Amazon, but we sensed it was along one of the many, many tributaries of the river. There's hundreds of them still. And so those people that live along the edges of the river are called Ribeirinhos, river people. And so that's basically why we called our book River People, because we were reaching in one stretch of the river, the Purus River, we were reaching different river people groups. So we started off, we saw this boat and we outfitted this boat. There was no email or no fax, there was fax, but it was very frustrating. It took about half an hour to send, but there was no email in those days, and so we just sent out our newsletter. And how this carpenter in Tasmania ever got a hold of it, who knows how he did, but he said, he wrote back and said, I'm coming over. And he was the greatest guy, very, very experienced carpenter. And he helped us refurbish the whole boat. Because of course we had 3 young children by then. And so we had to chicken wire fence the whole boat.
Oh my goodness.
So they wouldn't fall over, right, and fall in the water. And we did that maiden voyage from Manaus, which is where we started for 4 years, up to Labria with building a home for a halfway house for the missionaries that were working in the Zuluaha tribe. And that was a treacherous voyage where we sunk the boat, and all kinds of things happened on that maiden voyage. It was awful. And so we hardly made it. I felt like we hardly made it, but we did, because God was with us. Yeah. And we eventually arrived in the location upriver from Labria, about 8 hours upriver, in a place, and we parked our boat in a community, in front of a community called Samauma, and just started living like the people, dressing like the people, becoming as much of a belonger as we could, and reaching out. And just eventually people would ask us questions. Well, why are your kids so healthy? Well, they're healthy because, two things, probably main things, is we drink clean water. Oh, what's the value of drinking clean water? They've not seen under a microscope like we have, and explaining all that, sitting down, learning, teaching, bringing understanding. And then helping my husband, collect little boys. That was their job, the 10-year-old boys, watching my husband go and collect clean water from the fast-flowing current in the river, and all those changes. And so when we arrived, the infant mortality rate was about 40%, and by the time we left, we lived on the boat for 3 years, and then went back into the community of Labria downriver. But by the time we left, it was probably zero, because there weren't any other babies dying. It was, and that's just clean water, and and just hygienic, living.
So all of your training from being a nurse and a midwife really would have helped significantly.
Yeah, it helped, but a lot of what we learnt was very first world, very heavy in terms of interference, and everything there is very natural and but you get this sort of, I don't know, I think it's a kind of a sense, of how to go about things. I think God was always helping me, because people would come and, I sometimes wouldn't have even diagnosed that disease before, and I'd just be able to, it was supernatural, really.
Wow, how amazing.
Yeah.
How did you go as a mum? Like, I just keep thinking, you have 4 young children on this boat for 3 years. How did you go as a mum?
Well, the kids are part of the calling as well. They're so blessed, they just ran around under the fruit trees, and like any other kid would chase pigs under the houses on stilts with sticks, and now one's a psychologist in Melbourne, one's a marketing director here, one's a top hairdresser in Sydney, and one's a high school teacher, and they're totally fitting in to this lifestyle here. But of course, as a mum, you're so worried, are they going to get all the English? Are they going to be intelligent enough for the school system here when we came back? But they were. I mean, it was God's grace. But He uses them. I remember one time we had a girl, she was a single girl, she came from another state, and somehow she ended up staying with us, and she was going through a really hard patch in her life. And my little daughter, she was about 3 years old, maybe 2.5, and she's very gifted by God to know what to say and how, in prophecy, And I remember one time she turned to her, and she wouldn't have even known these words in Portuguese. And she said, "You are a beautiful flower of God." Oh. And this girl just burst into tears. And, that's just an example of how God so wants to use kids. Yeah. And they felt very much a part of the calling.
Oh, how beautiful.
Yeah.
What an incredible place to grow up as well. Yeah. Reflecting on now, the psychologist, all of those incredible, their book smarts and everything like that. Yeah. What an incredible place to grow up. So what was the biggest challenge you found living on a boat for 3 years? What was the hardest thing you faced?
It's really, really hard when you go to another nation and you can't speak the language properly or completely, and you can't make a friend. And so I think without being able to speak the language completely well, you just don't have that capacity to make that friend. And just straining in a service or anywhere and thinking, if only I could listen better, then I would pick it up, pick up the language. And so that was really, really hard in the beginning, I think. Lonely, I felt lonely because I couldn't make a friend, but then I made some wonderful friends that are still, super good friends now. On the boat, I think there's lots of grace on you because you just think, this life is so different from my life in Adelaide, and you just think, well, in the beginning you're taking 3 showers a day or 3 baths in the river, swims in the river, but later on, 2, later on 1, you cope. You adjust. I just think I spent a lot of time homeschooling my kids, baking bread and cooking and using measurements. They learnt math by measuring things and drew animals. And so when they came home to school here, and the teacher would say, draw your favorite animal, they were drawing, jaguars and different kind of Amazonian animals, and people here were drawing cats and dogs and things like that. Their reality and their world is so different. But it really has enriched their lives. It really has made them. And I was very nervous taking my first daughter to school. She was entering grade 7. It was high school in Victoria. And I was so nervous. I was just like on the point of tears, when she had to go in. And at the end of it, because I had no idea how she was really going to be, And at the end of first term, the English teacher said to me, wow, she said, your daughter, she's so advanced, she's so mature, And I just thought, oh, God, that's your grace. I had no idea that was going to happen.
Amazing. So what would have been your favourite memory from spending the 3 years on the boat? I know that's I'm sure you've got so many amazing memories, but is there one that stands out to you, when you were ministering or outreaching to the people? I remember, in the beginning people, these are the stories we heard, that in the beginning, when we were first there, they didn't trust us because every traveling preacher that came up the river, they used to throw rotten tomatoes at him or whatever, and we'd heard those stories, and so they're quite reticent at trusting a newcomer, and so they really were thinking, why are they living amongst us? What do they want from us, And we just were able to befriend them every day and make friends, and just to, after a while, to see how much they trusted us and cared for us is very, very beautiful memories that I have, and how they receive anyone that there's quite a few teams that still go there, and from different parts of the world, and they're just so generous and gracious and kind, and just the friendships amongst them, I think, were pretty amazing. What happened, some of the amazing things. Wow. If you could do it all over again, would you do it?
I think I would. I think I'd be so totally different. We're so risk adverse as we're older, but I think that's why young people are so used. And because you take risks when you're young that perhaps you wouldn't when you're older, because you calculate things a lot more. But at the same time, I have a real heart for baby boomers and that age group, empty nesters, and that, that's really the time to find our identity and find what God wants us to do and move out into that, because it's an ideal time. The kids are off our hands, we're often a little bit cashed up, and we can live quite simply and go and do something amazing.
Wow.
Pretty ordinary, but an extraordinary God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you doing now? You've had your adventure and obviously you're still connected to the mission over there.
Very connected.
So what kinds of things are you doing now?
10 years ago, we pioneered the community development school in San Diego, Tijuana, Mexico. So San Diego is one of the main offices, and then about half an hour in the border across Mexico, in from Tijuana, is another beautiful base, and they build homes for the poor. They've built over 5,000 homes for the poor.
Wow.
That guy from Homes of Hope grew up with my husband in Minnesota, in America, and they build homes for the poor. So after they build the home, they hand the keys over, and they also give them a really simple gospel message in a Bible and tell them how much God loves them.
Yeah.
And then the Youth with a Mission leaders, they wanted to reach the families more, and they wanted to do more follow-up. So they asked us if we would run a community development school to help with that whole aspect. And so that's why the school's there, and that's been very satisfying. We've been invited every year. We don't have to leave the school anymore. We go for 2 or 3 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, and then we also go to different YWAM bases. On this trip now that we're leaving in about 3 weeks, I'm going to be teaching healing on a school in Virginia Beach.
Yeah.
From a Brazilian couple that was here in Adelaide. They're now leaders of YWAM Virginia Beach, and I'll be teaching that on a 6-week counselling seminar, not
Amazing.
a school. Yeah. And then we go to Bali after that. After we come home for a couple of weeks, we go to Bali, and then from Bali, where my husband's mentoring a young Brazilian guy who's married to an Indonesian, and he runs the School of Community Development over there. But my husband, as Director of Australian Mercy for Youth with a Mission here, they also work together. He's a field director, that guy, Rob. And so then from there, we will go to India and Bangladesh.
Oh my goodness.
And they're really close to our heart, those works. We're very connected with a widows sewing program in Bangladesh. And also, we love teaching in those places because there's a 25-year-old guy that I've been mentoring who has a church of 60 people, 25 years old.
Yeah.
Whereas, often in a Western nation, we'll just get one more degree after another degree, and that's it.
Yeah.
We won't necessarily be doing anything life-changing, kingdom building.
Yeah.
But they do, and so we love that.
Yeah, amazing. So you mentioned before that you've written a book. We've got it here, River People. How exciting. This is such a good read. I've read it myself. Have you written any other books?
My husband has written some articles. He's a bit of a brain, a bit of a research guy, and he has been asked to write another book. So
wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But it's available on Amazon if you're interested, or on our website.
Yeah.
lifetogether.com.au is our website.
Excellent. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on, Josephine. Your story is absolutely amazing. Before we go, I do have to ask you, do you have any other plans to go back to the Amazon?
We would love to go back, and last time we went about 5 years ago and took a team, and Paulette came,
Beautiful.
the girl that you interviewed last week, and we'd love to go. It's just sometimes hard to get there. It's quite far and quite.
Absolutely.